Hey, everybody, and welcome to Keep the Change. We are, as we always say, so glad you're here. So glad that you're hanging out with us. So glad that you're taking your valuable time to listen to some incredible people that really, frankly, are life changing. And I am just blown away how many times I run into someone at an event, or maybe it's a friend that I haven't talked to for a while, or maybe it's a friend I've talked to recently who can just be the perfect guest for the perfect time for someone listening to this. So I welcome you, and I'm just so honored. My guest today is Dr. Katona Linn, and Dr. Ann has an incredible story of being a passionate educational coach and a leader, and she's dedicated her career to helping schools and communities develop safe, supportive, positive school climates. How about that? I mean, that's her whole passion. When I met her at a seminar about a month ago, and I just knew her heart really was one that you needed to hear. Her heart for changing the world, man. It's just really, really evident. So, Dr. Ann, thank you so much, friend, my new friend. Thank you for being here. Thank you for letting us hear your story. Tell folks about you, what your journey has been, and also what got you to this place of influence that you're on now.
Thanks so much for having me, Bart. I'm really excited to be here. So, my journey, I recently really have looked into that even more, and obviously doing more speaking. The last 20 years, I've really spent a lot of time looking back at my journey because I was struggling. I was in a bad place. So, it really kind of needed to happen. It needed to come out. I needed to pull some band-aids, and so I did. And so taking it back, when I was growing up in Pennsylvania, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I was 4 years old. I'm the youngest of seven, and we had a big family, and we had a fairly close family. And I was in a car accident, and what happened was I went face first through the windshield. And
Mm.
so from that accident, I remember all of it. I went through the windshield. They had to take me to the hospital. This was 1970, sharing my age. So
Mm.
back at the time, they didn't allow families to stay with you in the hospital. So I was really in the hospital by myself for an entire week. The only thing I remember was just the bad things. I don't remember anything good. There were no positive engagements with nurses. I just remember very negative, waking up in a crib and with white walls and bars on the windows and no pictures or anything. And I would get an antibiotic shot every single morning. So those were some of my earliest memories, and that kind of really set the stage for the rest of my journey. And God has blessed me in so many ways along the way, which has been really really neat. And I didn't always understand it, but now I do. Hindsight, looking back, I understand it, that all of those things happened to me as a child. After I got out of the hospital, we didn't talk about things. It was we just move on. If she doesn't bring anything up, let's let it go. And so, part of it was the culture of that's how we all did back in 1970s. We didn't go to counseling. We didn't talk about those things. We just kind of acted like they didn't exist. Mental health wasn't something that we looked at, as well as trauma. Trauma, was not, it was, we were starting to look at it in veterans and people coming back from war, but it wasn't even a topic of conversation. So I spent most of my life really feeling like something was wrong with me. Most of my childhood, I should say. I started drinking in my probably around 14 when I was a freshman in high school, and I remember, and even before that, I remember all of the triggers for me from the car accident. So if I felt uncomfortable in somebody, with somebody driving, or if there were thunderstorms. Thunderstorms were triggers for me because it was in the summer that this all happened. So whenever those things, I would have full blown panic attacks. So I had full blown PTSD as a child and didn't really know it. I didn't understand it. And then, as I said, I started drinking and really just drank to self medicate. Grew up in kind of rural Pennsylvania, small town, and that's what we did. We drank. It was acceptable. It was kind of a badge of honor. You were almost strange if you didn't drink.
Yeah.
Uh, we grew up very Catholic, and big family. So generally, I felt like I had a pretty good life. Again, I didn't understand. I just thought there was something wrong with me. So that car accident really created this insecurity in me that I just, it wasn't anything that my family specifically did. It was more of what they didn't do, but it was, again, kind of what we, in the 1970s, we just didn't talk about stuff. So
Right.
that was kind of my childhood. And then, just had other traumas. I went to California to try and, kind of grow up and to get some, to really, well, to go through college so that I wasn't actually paying for it because the cost of living, or when you were a resident in California, your tuition was basically free. So I was like, all right, I need to do that because I was taking student loans and didn't really want to do that. And when I was there, I was sexually assaulted. And so, again, all of these things, I grew up going to church, but I still had this deep hole inside of me that was not, no matter what I did, I was trying to always be perfect and trying to accomplish things and just, it's like, okay, what am I going to do next? How am I going to, make everyone proud of me? And maybe this thing that I think is wrong with me is going to finally go away. And I remember saying that, oh yeah, I had PTSD as a kid, got over it. So, so it was that, those were all kind of the things leading up to, just me trying. It was constantly, I was trying to figure out, like I said, my career started off in physical therapy and I loved helping people. And so I just kept going and I was an athletic trainer and, got my degree and was really being successful. I was running triathlon or running marathons and other road races and just continued on and kept trying and trying and none of it ever really, I was just very insecure in relationships. Like I said, I always felt like something was wrong with me.
You gave me so much that I just really want to drill it down. Okay.
Yeah.
Because somebody's listening to this and they say, yeah, I've had that. I've had that. I've had that. And I don't want to miss any of it because it's so fascinating, Dr. Ann, because you and I met by the grace of God. I mean, come on, man. We're at a seminar, a speaking seminar, with a guy who's given the seminar who doesn't really have the same beliefs we do.
Yeah.
A very talented guy, but kind of full of himself, right? And here this whole journey came about that you and I are in that same place with 150 other people, and I've made some great friendships from that.
Yeah.
And had some guests from that. Jeff, the one-eyed Jeff, has been on the podcast, and he
Yeah.
was phenomenal in terms of his
Yeah.
his journey. He's a wonderful person. And I just said one-eyed Jeff in case you didn't know his last name. So if you're listening, Jeff, Jeff Knapp is who that was. But
Uh,
I want to go back. I want to go back, and I want to
mhm.
talk about you. You went through a windshield. You had this incredible trauma. Your family didn't want to talk about it. And I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Toledo. I get that we always used to put the perfume on the pig. I
Mhm.
had a mama, my parents were upper middle class, nice custom home and big backyard, lots of grass, right? Just like
Yeah.
PA. The reason I say that is I think you can relate a little bit,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
it was we weren't Catholic. We were really weird. We were Unitarian. I have no idea
Oh.
what that even was. Yeah, isn't it? So, but my, not to make this a religion thing, but I think the cultural thing, there wasn't, my mom
Mm.
used to say she loved me by lifting up my hair and kissing me on the forehead and say, love to you. She didn't say, I love you. My dad
Wow.
never knew how to say that, right?
Yeah.
It was just that culture of the time,
Mm.
right? Don't,
That's exactly it.
everything's great.
Yeah.
Yes, it was the Joan Crawford time. No metal hangers. Don't let anybody see you sweat. Right?
Yeah.
I'll make, yeah. And Dr. Ann's got, yep. And
Yeah.
so I really, I get it and I appreciate it. And the funny thing is, I started tapping the liquor cabinet at 14 too, and I get that.
Mm.
And I wrecked 6 cars in high school. And this is not, it's not my podcast. It's your podcast today. But I'm just telling you, I get
Yeah.
it. I get it. But what I'm
Yeah.
so fascinated about with a lot of my guests who go through that trauma, who go
Hmm.
through the sexual assault,
Hmm.
and then end up from that. How does this even happen? That you can, it's almost like, Dr. Ann, we block it out to go
Hmm.
for success, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
Yeah.
asking, I'm not telling, I'm just going from a very,
No,
you know,
absolutely. Yeah.
and
Our
we
brains are actually kind of wired for that. Our brains are wired to protect ourselves. And so it's natural to want to feel that way. You
is
feel
that what
more
happened?
normal. I used to always be like, I just want to be normal.
Why is it, doctor, that some people melt and some people make the most of a terrible situation? Why? How is that? Is it our thinking? Is it our
Hmm.
belief? Because you said you had low self-esteem, I think I heard you say,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And but you overcame that. I mean, well, in terms of results,
Yeah.
right? I mean, on the surface, it looked like you overcame it. You're
Right.
triathlon, you're having success in your business. Let's go to that a little bit. How did you walk through going through a windshield, that that childhood that you had, and then going off to college to change your life and to start anew, and then you have that terrible thing happen, and then you went on to say, I started having incredible successes. Walk us through that a little bit, would you
Mm.
please?
Yeah, yeah. I think the successes didn't come right away. They, they were superficial successes.
Mm,
I got my degrees and I got my. This was still. I hadn't actually even gotten really into education. I was in physical therapy, athletic training, and really liked working with schools, but it wasn't. This was all through my 20s, and I still I did some drugs, nothing heavy, but drank mostly just to self medicate. So that went on in my early 30s, and just kept trying to figure out things that I was gonna. I had the perception that they were gonna help me feel normal. Again,
mm,
this normal.
yep.
But it so my I guess I actually ended up moving to Florida. That was kind of one of my MOs, was that I would move to somewhere
Geographic.
else. Like, I
Yeah.
kind of had a 6-year plan. It wasn't, you know, explicitly planned in my head that that's what it was, but I was 6 years in California and San Francisco area, the Bay Area. Then I
Mm,
was in 6 years in Florida, and then moved back to Pennsylvania. And I was in the eastern part of Pennsylvania for 6 years. And then I ended up moving back home. So all of those moves were part of this, like, battling through this pit of, I'm looking for something, I'm looking for self
mm,
esteem. And actually, a big piece of it happened when I was in Florida. I actually did start my own business. I had a home health agency, and I was still just trying to figure myself out. And I ended up working with kids with behavior problems, and absolutely fell in love with it. It
wow.
was very natural for me. It was just, I felt like, I got these kids, I get them. And not only did I get them, I could remember feeling like something was wrong with me. I mentioned that I remember all of these things vividly from childhood. And I think that I actually said this recently, was that we work with these girls in a juvenile detention facility, and I said, I think that the the things that had happened to me were actually gifts, and that,
Mm.
you know, they, and the fact that I remember that so well, because some people, like, they don't remember anything, like,
Right.
of their childhood, whereas I remember it vividly, like a movie.
Mm.
It's literally like a movie in my head.
Mm.
So when, I think that is a gift for me, because when I'm with kids, young adults, even younger, I can remember those feelings. My body is remembering what it felt like. And
Mm.
that is kind of that gift. I am an empath. So, but it's kind of that gift that it's helps me to get them a little bit more. It helps me to really have empathy for them.
Yeah.
So I thank God actually that I have that.
Yes. It's so interesting that when I look or hear other people talk about the pain that they went through can be such a path to the peace that or the place that they're really supposed to go. If they're
Yeah.
paying attention to it, what am I going to learn from this? What do I need to get out of this to make it valuable? And I believe God uses those broken pieces to help us become better at where he's taking us. He
Oh,
glues
yeah,
those pieces together for us so we can walk the
absolutely.
path to do his will, his journey for us if we're
Yeah.
paying attention. But sometimes he might say, I want you to do this, and we're not paying attention, right?
Oh,
I never wanted to
absolutely.
talk recovery. I hated
Yeah.
talking recovery. I wanted to have an Olympic gold medal. Are you kidding
Yeah.
me? I didn't want to have a book on recovery. And yet
Right.
he's used that. He used you, and it's fascinating. And I love to hear, it gives me chills. When you talk about I'm very empathetic to people, and I can relate to them, and I get them. You kind of said, I get them. Well, what I heard was, I really get them. I mean,
Yeah.
that was the message you said in that
Mhm.
statement. I really get them. My
Yeah.
soul gets them. And
Yeah.
I'm here to help them walk through it in a
Mhm.
way that they can have a life of significance, even though they've been through that. So,
Yeah.
keep going. That's so
Yeah.
good. So
Yeah,
good.
yeah, and so when I started doing this work, and I still hadn't really had my breakthrough, but then I was still hanging out with my friends and really partying, and going out to clubs, and I just felt like there was still so much missing, and I was about 33 and 32, actually, I think it was at the time, and I just really felt like I needed to do something different. And I actually started going back to church, because there were years I didn't go at all.
Sure.
And I remember going to this church. It was a neat little, not really small, but a good Catholic church in Tampa, Florida. And he was talking, the pastor is the priest was younger, and he was talking about going to this choice retreat, which is it's basically a young singles, like young adults singles Christian, and you go through kind of you have a weekend, and you really go deeper, and then after the weekend, they have ongoing support. And it was that weekend that really, and it's across, generally across Christian denominations. It's not specifically, it wasn't a Catholic, it was for all Christians. And so during that period, I remember I was doing, we had one activity, and it was either write a letter to someone asking them to forgive you, or writing uh, a letter to someone else forgiving them. So,
Ooh.
yeah, it was like, it was just that one activity. And I remember when I was asking God for forgiveness, that I went through easily a box of tissues. I just cried. And that was really the specific point of breakthrough, that was it. And
Mm.
I just felt like I was a totally different person. Like, that chain of insecurity was truly broken. It was broken. Now, did I have instances of insecurity? Do I still have them today? Sure. But that time it was a different kind of thing. It was like the the deep part of my soul that chain was broken there, and that I
Mm,
knew who I was in that moment. And again, at this time that it was all happening, I didn't really process it, but
right.
now that I have, it's mind blowing. It's like, yep,
Oh.
God knew exactly what he was doing. So
There it goes again. I got all these little bumps going on. It gives me chills to
yeah,
have that and to be able to look back and say that was the moment.
yeah,
I had a friend of mine that I interviewed for the podcast, Regina Bryan, and she talked about her gratitude list that she did for 20 years, and a gratitude journal. And I thought, and it was a breakthrough for her. That was important for her because
mm,
she comes from such a place of light. I say, how do you do that? And she talked about her gratitude list.
yeah,
And then I hear that in conjunction with the forgiveness piece. I think that's so powerful. AA, NA, the 12 steps of recovery talk
yeah,
a lot about forgiveness,
yeah.
forgiving others, making a list of people you need to forgive and
Mhm.
call them in or write them a letter if they're not living anymore because it lets it out, right, doctor?
Oh
I
my gosh,
heard,
absolutely.
I heard a counselor talk about a California counselor who was a recovery counselor talk about when we're in addiction or we're in life, where it's like a vortex. It's look at it like a circle is what he wrote on the board. And
Yeah.
what happens is when you and I, the forgiveness letter, the gratitude list,
Mhm.
a 12-step group where we're getting around talking about our hurts, habits, and hangups. When you and I let that out, it's like a valve.
Yeah,
And in that letting out is where the healing comes. That,
absolutely.
thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing that.
Yeah,
That's
and it takes away the power of it, over us. And it is, it's like a Band-Aid. We have to debride things. We have to get in there and kind of dig out the bad so that
mm,
we can let in the good. So
mm.
but that
So
was just the beginning for me. Yeah.
yeah.
And I decided though that I think I felt worthy to actually move back home. And so, and my dad had some health issues, so I ended up making that decision that after this, I was like, oh, I am worthy to be home, because I think I felt like I didn't belong there, and I felt just I wasn't good enough. And so it was that breakthrough moving home. And as I said, that was really kind of the beginning of the journey. I was really focusing on even learning meditation. I became a part of this Christian singles group that we would have Bible studies and we would have all kinds of different activities. I was, one of the social coordinators, and we just had we had such a great, organization and group of us. And to this day, I just have so many fond memories of those people and all of those experiences. And then, moving back home was kind of a different journey. It was, I've been starting to do some of the work on myself, but now, it's really going to happen. I made a decision that I was going to stop drinking. I'm like, I'm just curious to see what I could do. And so then I was going to Thanksgiving at my family's home, and I also did decide to go and get my master's in special education, because this was, I wanted to go further,
Mm,
and really get deep. And so uh, I was going to Thanksgiving, I remember one time, and super excited about seeing my family. This is the first Thanksgiving that since I've been home, that I've been able to go to. And all of a sudden, I started having a panic attack as I was driving, and I've never had. It was very weird. I'm like, what is going on? And I had no idea what it was, and I could just. It was this God touching my heart and speaking to me, saying, "You have tried to heal on your own. Now it's time to heal with my help and professional help." So this was, again, at 33 years old, the first time I even had a conversation about, getting treatment. Really, like I said, that was very one or two sessions for the rape, and so it's this was powerful, and I can still hear that in my voice, like it's word for word. I can say it every time, or in my head I know that that was God's message to me, and that he really wanted me to dig through so that I can then help others,
Mm.
and that I can really use my bad experiences, that those experiences, and he can use them for good. um,
Yeah, I've got to hear the victory is coming so big here. We can tell, but I
yeah.
think somebody listening to this, I'm just believing, and I don't want to open up too big a wound, but I believe that because of who you are, the giver that you are, the heart that you have, you're strong. I mean, you are a strong woman, and it's obvious. Um, somebody caught up in their addiction with alcohol doesn't
Yeah.
go get their master's.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, you said I quit drinking and I got my master's. Those are actually two big deals, right? And
I
yet,
know.
how did you walk through? We don't need to go play by play,
Yeah.
but come from your heart and where you feel. You probably know where I'm going. How do you walk through sexual assault? If a woman's listening to this
Mm,
and is worried about who do I tell? What if I don't get through to the other side of this? I'm
yeah.
believing, Dr. Ann. I'm going to apologize in advance, but I'm believing that somebody needs to hear this.
Yeah. No, absolutely. There are so many women. It it has been the hardest of all of the trauma that I've been through. Obviously the childhood trauma, because of the fact that it occurred at such a young age, but that trauma of that sexual assault continues to be difficult to go through, because it's not just the voice in our head, it's the voice of society, and you
Mm,
literally hear it. Yes, now we have the Me Too movement, but there are still so many situations that, we just had Jeffrey Epstein, and Bill Cosby. Now really his whole that was all, his conviction was reversed, and Harvey Weinstein, all of those things. And we hear people say, well, why didn't you say something, years ago when it happened? And it's like, you feel like the deepest part of you is being just torn out and just soiled. Like it's this darkness that is really sticks to you, that is hard to get over. And even in relationships, that people, like guys that I've dated, it's not even comfortable to even tell them. Even my husband, when we first started, he was kind of having trouble wrapping his head around it, because I think a lot of people, if it hasn't happened to you, you can't,
absolutely.
it's hard to understand it. And it's like, well, why didn't you fight enough? That's always kind of one of the things. But when you are in basically a freeze mode, your body is past fight or flight.
Mm,
Flight is when you could run away. Fight is fighting to get away, to get them to stop. And the next phase is actually freeze. They're not all
yeah,
It's not
yeah.
all just those three. Freeze is when your body just separates from your mind. It puts you in this, I can't even move. And you may be able to move, but your brain is not there. It really kind of is out of yourself, looking down on the situation, and your brain is trying to protect you. So it's the thing that probably just earlier, this actually last year, the end of last year, I have a chapter in a collaborative book and in a compilation, and I we were talking about depression, and the book is Depression Lied to Me, and I went into that sexual assault in greater detail than ever. So here we are, 23 years. Oh no, longer. Almost probably 30, probably closer to, not quite 30 years, but definitely, yeah, probably longer than 35 years that this happened, and I'm still processing it.
Mhm.
So it is something that really it takes a long time, and that's when I say that it because of the fact that it is, like I said, it's an individual. We have our own shame from it, but the fact that society continues to have shame around this topic, it's not going to go away easily.
So what I heard you say, and obviously I can have sympathy but not empathy. And you had talked about the fight, flight, freeze. I heard that about one of the people that were at the house in Idaho. The woman that we've all heard this news that was in the house and did not get attacked. And people asked why didn't she call 911, whatever. And one of the psychologists said, psychiatrist, psychologist said it was because they were probably in that freeze mode. None
Yeah,
of us know how we're going to act in a situation, and I don't care. That's the fact. That's the one fact that I
absolutely.
do get. We can say something, but we never know. But what
Right.
I really want to hear is, and thank you for your heart, thank you for taking the courage to do that.
Yeah.
And again, if somebody's listening, what is the solution? Is it accountability partners? Is it a community? Is it constant therapy? What's the solution to get to a place where they can live without massive self hate,
Mm.
self esteem issues, and depression?
Yeah. And thank you for asking that. It's really kind of interesting in that after that time period, that kind of again breakthrough, I did do years and years of counseling and variety of different counseling. For the rape though, I didn't really get counseling for that. And I think there was so much shame that I couldn't even be honest about that to my counselor. Like,
Mm,
so that's bad. So I think the thing that probably has been some of the most helpful is talking with other women who have been through the same thing and hearing other women's stories. Actually the Me Too movement probably really contributed to me being able to talk about it. It's even though I didn't think that it really bothered me as much, I knew I if I still had trouble talking about it, then it still has power over me.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so I just had to, I think I spent more time really listening to other women who went through what I went through, talking with others about it, and even just watching movies. A lot of times, what happens when you have been through trauma, you almost can get obsessed with wanting to learn more about something. So, I really like watching documentaries on trauma, and it's kind of like a train wreck, but at the same time, because it also helps to lessen the pain,
Mm.
because you're processing it, even if you're not necessarily talking directly to someone about it, you're still able to process that pain that you've been through just by hearing other people talk about it. And it may trigger something that you really, you may cry, or you may write in a journal. I know I've had situations where I will, I've gone through phases of journaling, and journaling is really a very good thing to do with sexual assault, rape, because it is something that you're more likely to be free with it, versus you just have so much shame you can't even talk about it.
Something about getting anything in writing, isn't there? And I'm just saying, for my world, when I can just write about it, takes
Yeah,
that's a discipline.
it is.
I got a book. I went and saw Bob Goff for writers workshop one weekend, and I got a book when I was there, and it talked about whatever, as a writer, which I aspire to be, write 5 days, 5 pages a day, 1,000 words. And in that, it's really helped me because I'm not, okay, I'm going to write about this, not at all. It's what's going on in here, and a lot of that becomes a gratitude journal, and it
Mhm.
just gets that out again with
Yeah,
my stinking thinking or whatever, good, bad, or ugly, that I need to put out there. So thank you
yeah,
for bringing that up.
yeah.
Now,
And I think too, you're not able to, you're less filtered. Whereas
Yeah.
if you're writing, as I was going through the process of writing this book, I would completely go back and analyze it as I was writing it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I was given some really great advice, that you just have to get it. Just don't go back and edit it. Don't self edit as yep, you got to just let it out.
Yeah.
Chandler Bolt gave me some of that. And it's
Mm,
like, that's what I keep trying to always remember. Just get it out.
yeah. Yeah, I can see that. As a writer, just get it out. Don't overthink it. Just put the pen
Yeah.
to paper and see where your brain goes. And that seems congruent with journaling too. I mean,
Yeah.
I use my writing as a journaling piece. They kind of
Yeah.
go hand in hand.
Yeah.
You've had such great success. You've been able to, again, through your strength, through your day by day, one day at a time journey of recovery, through alcohol, not drugs, but alcohol, your recovery through some just unspeakable
Mhm.
assault, abuse, all that. Tell me a little bit about your journey, your victories. You've got a book out. We want to hear about that.
Yeah.
Talk to me about after you went to that weekend retreat. You got sober. You got your masters, and you really started working on you to a different level, and your career exploded on how God's using you to influence other people. We have to hear that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and even when I decided to stop drinking, I never felt like I had a problem with it. It was just that it was masking my symptoms.
Oh, okay.
Again, I was probably, to some degree I was, though. It really was easy. I just went 7 years. Just I was celibate, and I also just like quit drinking and really focused on healing myself. So
Wow.
I really, because of the fact that I wasn't looking for a relationship, I was able to focus on myself. I
Yeah.
knew I needed to heal alone. And
Yeah.
so I needed to do that first. And at this time, again, I was getting my masters, and I had the success. I had a house, and I had sold my business in Florida, and then was able to get my master's, and I got my master's in special education, and was then working with kids with autism and behavior problems, and just absolutely loved it. And I was naturally good at it. And so I continued to pursue that, and teaching those kids in both schools and in community. And then what happened was I accidentally found out that I was good at training and coaching. And so I started doing some training, and then I got a job at the state level doing training and technical assistance, for in the state of Pennsylvania around special education, and even expanding to other things, but around behaviors and kids with autism, and different models and practices related to that. And so over that was a 7-year period. And at this time, I was still continuing to do the work on myself. I was going to counseling. I was on medication for anxiety. It was really kind of some of those first phases. I was running triathlon. I was in probably the best shape of my life. I was doing triathlons, and I did a marathon with Team in Training. I had just I rode my bike all the time, and I was really fit. I was healthy, and then I was diagnosed with two autoimmune diseases. It was like,
Mm,
whoa, so I had all these successes, and then this thing happens. And I was diagnosed with lupus and Sjogren's syndrome.
mm,
And so, though I think because God had gotten me through so many other things already, that when I got them, when I got the diagnoses, I was like, all right, what are we going to do? Like, what's next? I got to figure this out. I'm
wow.
like, so I had already been healthy and already doing a lot of good things. I just went to the next level of, all right, really understanding. And this is where trauma kind of came up. As in 1998, was a study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, and it really looked at whether trauma, early childhood trauma, has an impact on health. And from the study, found very strong correlation, and especially autoimmune diseases.
Interesting.
Yeah. And
Wow.
so what they did was that they put a number to, they looked at 10 specific things that as a child, if you experienced any of these or witnessed them, and it's, so there's abuse, so there's physical and emotional abuse, neglect, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. And then neglect is physical and emotional neglect, which emotional neglect is very subtle. And then there is witnessing someone, like domestic violence. If you were, hit at all yourself, if a family member had mental health issues, a family member had substance use disorder, a family member was incarcerated, that those were the 10 things that they looked at and correlated that with medical records of these people. And it was a big study, like almost 18,000 people. And they found that, so for each time you said yes, that you had any one of those things, you get a score. So an ACEs score is what they call it. And they found that the more ACEs that you had, the higher your likelihood of having substance use disorders, if you know, trying to hurt yourself, suicide, other mental health issues, and that it wasn't just these were kind of bad behaviors. This was literally the trauma, much more of a correlation between the trauma and these things, and then heart disease, diabetes, all of those, you're at greater risk if you have more adverse childhood experiences.
That is stunning. That is
Yeah.
really powerful. Wow. I would have, I guess logically, I guess that makes sense, but I had never heard that before.
Yeah.
And that is, well, it's very sobering, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Things
And
that
when
we
I,
can't help.
right,
Yeah.
it's what happened to us. And that's kind of the shift. It's not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you, just
Yeah.
that shift of perspective.
Yeah.
And, once I heard that, I felt like, oh, I'm the poster child for this. And
Mm,
I didn't even really connect all the dots. But from
mm,
that moment, that was really when I'm like, oh, okay, now I do need to really look into the trauma that I
yeah.
didn't before.
Yeah.
It sometimes it's just permission, getting permission, and looking a little bit closer. But I was doing a lot of those things, and then and that was, like I said, a 7-year period of my life, and that's breaking through so many of those different things and just continuing on with my growth. It may not have been one specific thing. There were a variety of things, but they were all moving me in that path, and that God was able to use that. I was gaining more skills and doing training and coaching and working with kids with autism and with behavior problems. And then several years later, I got a job as a state project director for a grant that came out of the Sandy Hook and the Columbine shooting. So this was Safe Schools, Healthy Students. And this is from 2013 till 18 was the grant. And we had gotten it here in Pennsylvania. And from that, I really got into learning more about trauma in terms of my career. And we really were looking at how can we put all of these, how can we go upstream and focus on preventing things and really support kids in schools so that we're preventing them, we're preventing school shootings, we're preventing suicide, preventing all of these things, and building resilience so that the kids are learning skills that are going to help them to be more, able to bounce back and resilient.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me that your journey is fascinating. It's so cool. I mean, um, how far you've come and the impact that you're making and the choice that you made. I am just about changing lives. And you're in the front lines of doing that for young people. And it's so powerful. I
Thank you.
need to hear about today. How you feeling? What's the journey you're on today? And I know you've got a new book. I'd love to have you share that with our
Yeah.
group.
So, just to kind of give a little bit that I didn't talk about a whole lot, but I actually met my current husband, who Bart, you met, Mark,
Yeah.
and I met him after that kind of that 7 year period, and he was the first guy that I dated. And after 7 years, and here we are. We just had our 16th or 15th wedding anniversary. It's
Woo!
overdue. Yeah. So
Way to go, Mark.
yeah, it's kind of,
That's
but
good.
he had been through a lot, and he and his kids have been through a lot of trauma. And so it, you know, again, it kind of, it also, for that was another message that God's like, okay, you've done all that work on yourself. Now it's time to heal in a relationship.
That's
So Mark and I went through some different types of, trauma counseling together, and it was unbelievable, just really, really powerful. And so, um, so the last, oh, and then probably one of the big impetuses of him, of us, of this, all of a lot of this happening was he fell off of a roof in 2019, 30 feet, and had 7 fractured vertebrae. 2 of them were burst, and then 16 fractured ribs with like chunks out of his ribs. And just, it was a horrible situation. He That's a whole other story. We're actually writing a book about that. There were so many things that happened. Oh, and I was getting my doctorate in all of these things, in the middle of all of these things as well. And then COVID hit, and it just, God just kept moving me in this direction, that it's all connected. And there were so many people that supported us during his accident, that he and I, and we've had friends die by suicide, too many of them. And so we really were like, we need to do this more together. And you know doing different, having conversations with our friends, and just making sure that the people that are in our sphere of influence are in, moving forward, and making sure that they're getting help rather than just waiting until they're struggling. And so that kind of triggered me to write. Well, people are like, you guys need to write a book. And we're like, okay. And I'd been told previously that I should write a book for my story. And so I was like, all right. And, Mark's like, well, why don't you write your book first, and then you can help me with my, I'm like, okay. So that's kind of all how it all happened. And then the last 3 years after the grant ended, I've been doing all of this, and really wanted to get coaching to do this more on my own, and to also get my story out. And so, the last 3 years, actually 4 years now, that I've really spent building my business, because I've been doing trauma training. I wanted to take everything that I learned in this big grant and work with schools directly. So rather than just working at the state level, I wanted to work directly with schools. So that's what I do, is I help them, because it's complicated. Like, all of these dots are all over the place, and all of these different things are coming at schools, and they're overwhelmed. And I kind of have this gift of being able to see things from that balcony view, and to look at the big picture. And one of my nicknames is Spider Woman, because I like to connect dots. And so I help schools to connect the dots of all of the different initiatives, all of the different things that they have going on, and help them to create this cohesive and integrated environment that is positive, for not just for the kids, for staff, for families, for the administrators themselves. And so that's really, and part of that is training. So I do training and coaching of teachers, and I help leaders, kind of the school leaders, to help plan how to support the teachers. So, and then, again, I've now finished my book. So my book is Shedding Lies, Living Beyond Childhood Trauma. It tells more, obviously, about my story, and what were the things that were helpful, what are the things that weren't helpful, what do I wish I had, and so kind of walks through it in a little bit, really from my perspective of what it was like, and what the feelings were like, and what was going through my head. And like I said, the people who were there as part of it, and what they did that was really helpful to me. And so it's not always about doing this, big thing. It's helping kids to feel safe. It's just that experience alone. If every single adult knew how to make a child feel safe, that alone would be unbelievable to prevent a lot of the issues that we have with a lot of kids. It's just a lot of times we don't even know how to take care of our own selves and help
Yeah.
our own selves feel safe. And so that's kind of part of the process that the adults need to learn that for themselves. And that's a big piece of what I do now. So, yeah, so I'm excited to be just continuing to expand and sharing my story and connecting it to all of the work that I do, because it's I understand those kids, so I can help leaders, and I've been on that perspective as well. I've been a school leader, I've been a behavior specialist, I've been in a variety of different things, and they all come together because and I'm a family member. So I can take that perspective and understand and try and connect with all of the people that are a part of this, school community, and how can we make it better for everyone.
Mm. What's so fascinating is you're an educator. You're obviously very bright. You've taken also, you haven't dismissed the spiritual piece of this.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think that makes you so unique, right? And for you to understand both sides of it, you have also been through brokenness, and now you help other people get past brokenness.
Yeah.
And I think that makes you extremely unique, and you communicate it so well. But you know
Mm.
what I believe about you, and we're just meeting, and I'm honored. I mean,
Thank
I've got, I hope for you and Mark and
you. Mm.
myself, and maybe someday you get to meet Mary. Mary has a heart like yours. But
Yeah,
I hope that we get to have dinner sometime. But I hope we also become lifelong friends, because I'm
absolutely.
you are the hero of the world, right? The person that caught the touchdown pass in the game last night is not the one. It's
Mm.
you. And you've had to go through a lot of training camps,
Mm.
and to get to the other side. And I mean training camps with the trauma that you've had. And
Yeah,
you have, and you never gave up. You are a fight. You're a fighter, man.
I am a
It is
fighter.
fascinating. So your
Thank
doctorate is in psychology, and you got that from WVU.
Yeah, educational psychology, which is the science of teaching and learning. It's, around adult learning especially. So I really love trying to help the adults that work with the kids, because that's what I've seen is that they don't get teachers don't get a whole lot of training in college. Teachers and
It's
principals
crazy.
do not get they get very little training in college. And
I'm getting
so all of these things around school mental health and trauma and even just collaboration with families, that really helping people, and hearing youth voice, that all of those things are so powerful and have such an impact. It's just we have to all work together, and so
yeah.
that's kind of the thing.
So you never know with these. This I like to call this a cup of coffee, not a podcast sometimes,
Yeah,
because it's just you and I hanging out, right? But we
yeah,
don't know. We don't know if it's going 35 minutes and has such richness, or it goes 55 minutes and has such richness. It doesn't matter. But I'm
yeah,
so glad we got to go how long we had to go. I mean, that we got to go. Thank you.
yeah.
I'm glad you had the time. I'm glad we got to do it. I believe that the audience really gets to know you on a deep, deep level. I think that was so powerful. And I so thank you for allowing that to happen.
Thank you so
Tell
much
us,
for having me. It's been great.
yeah, tell us too about it. Has been great. It really has. And, for me, these podcasts have really taught me how to listen better and how to
Mm,
communicate with people that you and I have a lot in common.
yeah,
And, so it allows me to meet people that have stories that are common, but also stories that aren't like mine at all, where I can look at mine and say, mine wasn't that bad, right?
yeah,
And I'm not looking for that,
right.
but it makes me feel like, hey, you don't have anything to complain about, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
thank you for all you've done, and the time you spent. Again, tell us how to get a hold of you. Tell them the name of the book again. And I know, again, I love your website. Let everybody know how they can reach out to you, please.
Yes. So my book is Shedding Lies, Living Beyond Childhood Trauma. Should be coming out probably very early February.
Woo.
It's pretty soon. We're in the final push. And my website is www.katonalinnconsulting.com.
Can you
Without,
spell that for them?
yep, Katonali as in igloo, and Nancy consulting, consulting.com.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you can
Well,
go on there and reach me, and I have a form on there for you to fill out, and we can schedule a time to talk. So,
perfect. Please
thank
do.
you.
Please, if you're hurting, reach out to Dr. Ann. If you're at a place where my life is good, but I want to go that next level, and I really believe I need someone to help push me to that next level, or guide me, or coach me, please reach out to her. Please, Dr. Ann, give Mark a hug for me.
I
And
will.
I so appreciate you guys, and appreciate that you would
Thank
say
you.
yes. And
Yeah.
let's do this. You're changing the world, my friend, and I'm so excited to read your book.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, my friend. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Thanks again. Bye, everybody at Keep the Change. Thanks for coming. I know you got a ton out of this. Give us a review and let us know. And come on, keep coming back and reach out to Dr. Ann, because I know she'd like to hear about what you thought too. So God bless everybody. Thank you.